Hi everyone, my name is Burak Güzel and this is another episode of Codeigniter from scratch. Today we're going to be working with file helpers, directory helpers, and download helpers. So we're not focusing on a single large library. Instead of that, we're going to be looking at the smaller collections of helper functions that come with Codeigniter. Um, these are going to be uh, only the functions provided by Codeigniter, but there are also PHP functions that deal with file operations. If you would like to learn more about them, you can join the TUTS Plus. And last month, I have a article and a screencast published about file operations in PHP, so you can watch and learn from that too. Um, but today we're going to be using only Codeigniter, and at the end of the tutorial we're also going to build something like this where we can see the contents of a directory, and uh, in the subdirectories we are able to click and go further down, and this is just some jQuery magic here. But before that, we're going to look at some helper functions first. So if you go to codeigniter.com and download it and extract it and open it in your editor, we can get started. So uh, something I added here was this images folder, and I put this file and folder.png files. You'll get them when you download the source code. It's just small icons that look like this, just a file image and a folder image. Um, so other than that, just set up your config as usual. Put your URL, and I removed index.php with the help of adding also the htaccess file, just like last time. So to get started, I'm going to create a controller. So today we're not going to be creating any models. We're just going to look at a few helper functions, and we can do that by just creating some test controllers. I'm going to call this just files, and it's going to be class files extending the controller class. So since we're going to be using file helpers, I'm going to create a constructor where I can just load the helper and don't worry about it again in other functions. So as you remember, when you create a constructor function, you have to call the parent constructor like that. And if you load any kind of helper, it becomes available in any functions inside this controller. So let's create our first test. This is going to be a write test, and we're going to be using a helper function named write file. So this is going to take some kind of data. Let's put some text here, hello world, and also this writes this data into a file. So we got to provide a file path. Here I would like to create, in my application folder, I'm going to create a new folder where I can put this stuff in. So I'm going to create a folder called test files, and I would like to create a file under this folder by using the write file function. So let's type in the file path here. I'm on Windows, so it would be backslashes for file paths, but I will show you how to do this more properly. So if I were to write this application in Windows and gave it to somebody who's going to put it on Linux, this might cause problems. So I'm going to show you a constant that's used for making your paths universal. So if you just use this constant called directory separator, it will translate into backslash for Windows and / for Unix systems, or I think also Mac uses that. So if I put that in, the path will be actually more universal. So the path is relative to the index.php file of Codeigniter. So from index.php, I go into application folder, then I go into test files folder. And I will create this hello.txt under the test files folder. If I call this write file function, the first parameter will be the file path, and the second parameter is the data that's going to be written into the file. I will just also put echo finished writing, and now we can go into the browser and go to this new controller. It's under CI series, files, and write test. That's the name of the controller and the controller function. So when I load that, I will see that message, and if I refresh my test files folder, I see that a hello.txt got created. So I didn't specifically have to do anything else to create the file. Just calling the write file function will create the file and then write into it. So if I open hello.txt, I will see the contents. And if I refresh the page, a few times, I see that the content is still the same, but it actually still writes to the file, but what it does is it truncates it first, removing everything in it and then rewriting it. So if I change it to like 2 exclamation marks at the end of hello world and refresh the page, and I see that now we have 2 exclamation marks in the output. So what if you want to preserve the contents of the file and just append data to it? For that, there's a third parameter here, and this is the mode of opening the file. And you might have seen this from the fopen function of PHP. So if you put A, which means append. So if I refresh it now and look at the hello.txt file, I'll see that it's repeated twice. So because the second time it was appended at the end of the file. So for example, if you put R, nothing will happen because it's a reading mode. And there's one more, which is X. This will also rewrite the whole file, but it only works if the file does not exist. So if I refresh, or let me change this content, I'll just remove the exclamation marks. So I'll just refresh and I look at hello.txt, it's unchanged because it's not going to write if the file exists. So if I delete hello.txt and then refresh, I'll see that the file got created and it was written to. So it's sort of a exclusive write kind of thing. And that's for the write file function. And let's look at reading. So let's create a read test. This is just calling the read file function and passing the file path. So I'm going to do something here real quick. I'm going to take the file as I'll make it as a class member, and in the constructor I'm going to initialize it as this file equals this whole thing. And so instead of redoing an array function, I can just refer to it as this file. So I'll pass it to this read file function also. So this returns the contents of the file. So we can either store it in a string, or echo it. So we can just do echo that. And if I go to read test, I'll see the contents of the file printed to the screen. And so that's a simple function. That's all there's to it. And let's do another function here. This is going to be using the get file names helper function. This takes a folder, a path as an argument. So the function is get file names, and I'll also put a path here. This path, I'll take the path and put in a separate parameter. So what I did was I put the path to the file into this path, and use that again to create this file. And I'm going to pass the path here, and this returns an array. So we can get it into the files function. Files variable, and just I'll print R. This just outputs the structure of a variable in case you're not familiar with print R. So this returns an array, and let's look at what the array looks like. So it's just an array with one element, and that's the hello.txt file. And let's see, we can add another subfolder into the test files directory. Let's go ahead and add like foo, and in there I'm going to add bar.txt, and this will have hello bar. So now in the test files folder I have one file and another folder that has another file in it, and see what this get file names function does now. As you see, we got both files, and even though they're in different folders, but they're under the same parent folder, they're both included. We can't even tell if they're in the same folder or not. So there's a second parameter to this get file names function, which is just a Boolean value. By default it's false, so if you pass true, it's going to give us the full paths of every single file. So this is like the full path, starting with my drive name and everything. So you can see which folder they're exactly in. So the bar.txt is under foo, and hello.txt is directly under test files. So that's the difference. And that's that. And the next function we're going to be looking at is dir file info. So let's create another test controller. Dir file info test, and this is also a function that returns an array, and we pass again the path. As you remember, the path is application test files folder. So let's see what that gets us. Print R. Now we got a bigger output. I'm going to view the source so it's more readable. So again, we got both files, and this time we're getting multiple parts of information about each file. So we just get the straight file name and the full path, just like last time, and we're also getting just the folder path that contains each file, and we get the byte size. This size is in bytes, and the date is the timestamp of the file. So if you want more information about a file, you can use this, and so that's that. And let's look at another function. This time we're going to be using the get file info function. So I'm going to create a get file info test. Again, this returns an array. Let's get file info. This time we're going to be passing the uh, file path. So this gets information about a single file. Let's call this info instead. So I'm going to file info test, and it's similar to this other function, but instead this one gives you information about a single file. So that's again pretty simple. Also, this one has a second parameter. So let's say you're not interested in the whole information. You just want, for example, the date only. So if you pass date here, you'll just get that value only. Another function for getting an info about a file is mime test, and this gets the mime information, but it's not actually reading the file itself. It's getting it based on the file's extension only. So if you change the file's extension, it will get, accordingly, whatever the contents of the file is. So it's get mime by extension. This file so since it's a text file with a txt extension, it gets text slash plain. This is the standard name for a MIME type. But this also, for example, if you can pass a non-existing file, like just say hello.png instead. So it will say image PNG. So as I mentioned, this is not, it doesn't check the file's contents, it doesn't check if the file exists, it just reads the file path or the name and finds the file's extension and gives you the corresponding MIME information. And one more thing we're going to look at is a download helper. The download helper requires us to load the download helper first so we can use it. Download test. This is for instead of outputting something into the browser, you might want to get serve the output as a download to the user. For example, I'm going to have a string, and I want this to be, this could be any kind of data inside this variable, and I want this data to be downloaded. So I call the force download function, and I have to give it a name. So it could be anything here, foo.txt, whatever, and that the contents. So the two parameters are the file name and the contents that's going to be downloaded. So this will prompt my browser to download a file named foo.txt. Even though this may not exist on the server, I just pass it as a parameter, as you saw here, and I pass the content. So if I open this, it will show the contents of the one that I forced it to download. You can also use this to download a real file. For example, instead of foo.txt, let's say I have my hello.txt in the test files folder, and the contents I can get it by using the read file function we used earlier. So I'll use that for the second parameter, And this time when I go to download test, you'll see that now I'm downloading hello.txt and the contents is hello world, which was the contents of my hello.txt file, which I got by using the read file function. So as one more helper I'm going to show you, and after that we're going to build that little application I showed you at the beginning of this video. And I'm going to call this just display for now. And we're going to get the contents of a directory or folder and displayed in a tree structure, sort of in an array. And this is done by calling the directory map function. But to use that, I need to load the directory helpers. This load helper directory. So this also takes a path, and this time instead of the test files folder, I'm going to use my system folder, the system folder of Codeigniter, because it has a bunch of files in it, so it's gonna look nicer. Base path. This constant refers to the system folder. I might have mentioned it in the last video, I think. So let's just print artist for now, see what happens. You see a lot of stuff here, so we gotta look at the source code. Now this is an array and it's multi-dimensional, and something you have to pay attention to is the way the array indexes are. Some indexes are just strings and some are just numbers, and the difference is the ones that are the ones that are strings refer to another array, and these are folders basically. And if you go to, like, a numbered one goes to a file, so it's a string, which is index.html here. So another folder, for example, there's a helpers folder that has a lot of files in them, so those are also numbered indexes. So if the index is a string, it's assigned to an array, which is a folder, and if it's a number, it's assigned to a string, which is a file. Now I'm going to build that application I showed you at the beginning of the tutorial, which involves some jQuery as well. So let's go back to the code, and I'm going to assign this into something that I can pass along to a view, and I'm going to load a view. I'll name it also files. Also for this I'm going to need the URL helper. I'm just going to load it here. I'm going to need that later on. And so let's create our view. So we have it in this variable here. If you look at the source code, you have the HTML and then that array. So I'm going to use some, I'm going to create a div first. Oops. And use some JavaScript. And I would like to put this in a JavaScript variable using JSON. The JSON encode function takes any kind of PHP variable, and when you JSON encode and output it, it converts into a JavaScript native format. So we can turn it into a JavaScript array like that. I also would like to put this in a document.ready function. Okay. Before I go further, I'm going to show you the other one I've done already. Okay, this is going to be the finished product, but I would like to show you on this why we're doing certain things. So first, I would like to create a file tree and calling a function called build file tree and passing this array, and then I need to have this function implemented. So what this does is it creates an unordered list. It's just a UL tag, and once we build it up, we're going to return it. And once I return it, I'm going to append it to my files div here. So this is inside the files div. It's an unordered list. It's like actually a nested list. So I have to build this and then append it to the div folder. I mean div tag. So I'm going to have to loop through the files array. And inside this array, we have two types of elements. So some of them are files, some of them are folders. And if they are a folder, the type will be object. Otherwise, it's going to be just a string. So we're going to handle folders here and files here. So as you see, we have folders like database is a folder and db.php is a file. So we have to handle them differently. So if it's a file, I just need to do li creating a new list item and just assign the value as the HTML because that's just a file name. This is the file name, and append to tree. And I also want to add some CSS class so I can do some styling later on. This is going to be a file class. So append it to the tree, and the HTML contents is the file name. And that's all I have to do for this. But the folder part is going to be a little more complicated. And for this, I actually would like to create a span around the folder name. And I want to make it clickable. So there's going to be a span created by jQuery again, and the HTML contents of that will be X. X is the array index because for folders the array index is the name of the folder. I'm going to append this. Now there's going to be, for each folder there's a sub list here, so it's like this is a whole tree, but each subtree is also like the parent tree. So we're going to have a recursive subtree here. But before that, I'm going to enclose it into a list item again with the class of folder. So now back to the subfolder, subtree I was talking about, which I have to get by calling the function itself with the like sub array. So it's files x. So this refers to the array that's like under the database, and this is like the array, which also has its own subarray. So it's going to keep calling it recursively to keep getting all these subtrees. And once I have that subtree, I want to keep those hidden because I only want the parent to be visible by default. And is there a typo here? Yeah. And I would like to added after the span I just created with the folder name. And to that span, so the span includes just the folder name, I would like to assign a click event. And this click event will toggle the visibility of the subtree. So um, the event returns, the clicked object, which is the span, and the parent is the li, and under that li I have to find the list item, but only the first one. The reason I'm only doing the first one is because if I click this, if I click this, I'm only interested to get uh, the first list instead of all the sublists. So this click should toggle only this subtree, not the ones below. That's why I have to do first and toggle that. Um, and I think that's it. So if I change this URL or just close this page, okay, I'm going to refresh this, and I got this unstyled version. And if I click, I can see them just opening and using these circles, dots, and squares. These are just the default HTML styling, and we're going to change that with some CSS. So this is working. Let's add just some font. So we have these two different classes. One is folder and one is file. The folders will receive a background image of, I would like to use in the images folder I showed you, there's folder.png. I would like to use that image. So I would refer to it as the base URL / images folder.png. And background repeat. I don't want it to repeat, I just want it once. And file will be similarly, I can just copy paste this whole thing, and instead of folder.png I'm going to use file.png. And I need to remove this default styling, these dots and everything from the left side. So I'm going to style the UL tag with setting this list style to none, and I will add a hand. This cursor pointer will just make it show up as a hand symbol. And what else? If I refresh it like this, it doesn't look right. I gotta align some things. So if I add some padding, and also each list item, pixels, that should do it. So now if I refresh, everything is aligned a little better now, and they're clickable as before, and I have my hand cursor. So it's kind of a little exercise of building something that might, if you expand on this, like you can add download links, or you can add drag and drop functionality and add some Ajax, so you can get yourself a full-fledged file browser script. But I just want to show you what you can do with combining Codeigniter functionality and some little jQuery. So I hope you learned about using files, folders, directories, getting information, downloading them. But if you like to learn more about PHP's native functions about files, you can just join the Tuts Plus program and look at last month's tutorial on that. Um, so I will keep making these Codeigniter from scratch videos. I will see you next time. Bye.